direction from the council after we have an opportunity to look at some of those factors.
My concern,
Okay.
I'll tell you, merit was kind of my baby here,
Mm-hmm.
so I understand that you know, the issues, when you're dealing with something like this for the first year, you're going to have your bumps in the road, and I think
Right.
we've had some significant ones. But as Christina said earlier, I don't think we should take it off the table permanently. If it merits additional study and an analysis, I would not be averse to that, but I think that any successful organization, high-performing organization, has a performance incentive component. That's what merit is. If you take that off the table, that makes it harder for those organizations to progress to that next level. But you've got to do it right. You've got to have empirical evidence. You've got to have metrics. You've got to know what you're measuring. And you've got to take as much of the subjective component out of the process as possible. And I think there is a perception, it may not be valid, but I think there's a perception among some people in the community that it was much more subjective than it should have been. And so, again, that's all bumps in the road in the process. I think merit on balance is a good means of incentivizing performance. I think we need to find that balance, as you said. We need to strike that balance between those three pieces of compensation. And if we need to focus on market in the short term, let's focus on it.
So let me ask
Go
this.
ahead, Chris.
But,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just, yeah.
Do we have an opportunity, I mean, because from a budget perspective, really, we just have to say, we want, whatever, let's say $150,000, just to make this simple. $150,000 added to salaries next year, 2015, okay? So, if we do that, generalize it, and we say we're gonna do this pay study, knowing that some or all of that, based on the pay study, could be utilized to close gaps in pay, or some of it could be used to close gaps in pay, some of it could be used as a merit pool. I guess from my perspective, if we identify at some point, let's say in December, that we're going to have $50,000 left over that could potentially be used for merit, whether we do that or not shouldn't change the performance review process next year. You should still be rating your employees. You should still, I mean, if somebody scores a certain number, I mean, they're still considered excelling, right? What may change is at what level we pay out. But in my opinion, and I kind of said this before, I don't believe that we should have to say we're going to pay everybody at a 2.76. I think any business, I mean, you have a certain amount of money, and I'm sorry, when it runs out, it runs out. Not everybody, I mean, there's a purpose for that. So setting those clear expectations at this point in time, in my opinion, are critical. I think that, like I said, I don't believe, I think most people would say, I don't want my performance review tied to whether you can give me merit or not. I want you to rate me based on my actual performance, and you know what? If there's the money to give me merit, then great. But if not, I still want my rating, you know. So I guess that's my question. Do we have to say right now we're not going to give merit? Or can we say, as a governing body, this is how much we think we can afford to spend somehow in salary, whether it be through an adjustment or merit or a mix, but we're not going to be able to decide that until we understand what we're going to do with this pay and comp.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
I mean, if I understand what you're saying correctly, I mean, we've kind of established a figure about that already. I mean, we were talking about a 3% cost of living adjustment. What would a 3% cost of living adjustment cost?
1% is 80,000. But
3%
so I guess that's not a true statement. 3% cost of living was 150,000 across the organization. The 80,000 figure I just gave you is if you took the 80,000, you could do 1% to everybody for COLA.
So we were already, our idea originally, before now, was to give $150,000 worth of cost of living adjustment.
That's what you're doing.
And then 80,000 for.
You wanted to turn it into another
a merit
percent.
pool. So, but we could budget $230,000 for,
Well, that's essentially what you've done.
yeah.
Right.
So we can do that, do the salary study, determine whether or not we need to make adjustments, see what those are going to cost. You know, talking to Cheryl about that offline a little bit, I kind of get the impression that, you know, if we've got some classifications that are far enough out of whack that we might have to take a 2-year approach to getting some of those people up to, and I think we talked about that in the open meeting.
Right.
Yeah, so a 2 or 3 year process to get everybody up to a standard. So I think that how we get to employee compensation and how it gets distributed in 2015 doesn't necessarily have to be done before we approve the budget, but it has to be done responsibly after we approve the budget. But if we could get the cost of service, I think it's a cost of service study, not myself this evening, the salary study done before the end of the year, we could get that instituted at the first of the year as far as market adjustments. I don't know that it's going to leave anything left over for cost of living adjustments.
But why do we have to, I mean, that's what I'm saying, I don't understand why we have to label it, so.
Well, we don't have to label anything right now. We basically identified
Yeah, of course.
an amount of money.
Well, let me tell you why I think you do. And this is just based off what we've heard. What happened when we put a merit system in place? Did we achieve a higher performing workforce and they worked to achieve higher scores to provide a better work result? That's the interpretation I have.
That is correct.
Okay.
We asked the council for $60,000 last year based on your 5-year trend.
Right. No, I
And,
understand why the
and
numbers
yes,
don't match that part,
we
but
ended up needing additional
that
money.
gave the workforce the understanding that if they worked at the high performance level that we're demanding of them, there would be reward for that.
That is correct.
What they're going to hear tonight is the fact that the council's decided to pull that away for the upcoming year. And now what you're going to see is my evaluation. Best case scenario, I score well and don't get anything. Worst case scenario is they use this as a rating for moving forward, because that's what the study says as you go for growth. I better tank when I'm not getting paid for it, and then next year when they put the merit pool back in place, I'll score back where I need to achieve what I wanted to get. I think you just de-incentivize your workforce by doing such a thing. But what I have said, so let me ask this question. So when were the evaluations completed in this past year?
They were March.
So in March. So these rewards weren't actually designated and achieved until April of 2014, correct?
Right.
Or give or take.
But effective January,
They were
because that's when you
retroactive.
authorized the money.
Right. But they were there, so.
Yes.
From my perspective, I don't understand why we can't complete the further study. I see the merit and the salary study, we've been talking about that for years. I'm actually disappointed we're having this talk now. This talk should have been during last when we were discussing merit pay. These should have been anticipated, where I feel like we're knee-jerking to some of the feedback that we've gotten when that should have been the case. I don't know why we can't further the study and have some of these things completed while still continuing the evaluation process, because at the end of an evaluation is an evaluation. You're still judging workforce on the work that's expected of them, and I don't think that's going to change. And then the rewards can still be in place by the time that comes around from that time frame, and we can still leave the $80,000 merit pool in place that we've already talked about, and I believe 4-1 there was consensus to do so.
And I agree with you. I don't think that Christie or Steve was suggesting that we stop. I mean, even if we weren't to offer a incentive in 2015, by the time we start, I think that we'd be looking at a 2-year snapshot instead of a 1 for next time that we would go for merit. But I agree with what you're saying. But I think that, you know, if we've got $230,000, we probably ought to use the $150,000 for you know, market adjustments as required, and
COLA.
or COLA. But I think we've got enough salaries that are
I think with the
out of whack that you know, we're gonna need to address that
I don't know that,
sooner or later anyway.
from my perspective, I don't know how you adjust that mid-year under a budget. I think that's a study that then you implement for the 2016 budget.